I had a question, an email question come in from Julie, and we want to know if price breaks above the previous bar high by 2 ATRs, or if price breaks below the low plus 2 ATRs. All right, so we can see right now the ATR is at 0.05, essentially 5 cents. So 2 ATRs would be 10 cents since our ATR is at 0.05 right now. So we want to know if price is going to break 10 cents above or 10 cents below the previous bar's high or previous bar's low, such as that. Alright. And solvers do have an ATR measurement built into them, so this is going to be fairly simple. Alright, so let me first set up the file name for today. And alright, so there's the BloodHound file name for this week's workshop. And let me just create a new logic template, and I'll name it later. And for now, let's just throw an indicator comparison in there. So this is going to be a 2x ATR high low, gosh, I guess I'll call it a breakout for lack of a better term. Alright, so connect that up like so. Alright, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be comparing price to price. So we're going to be comparing the closing price. So we want to see if the closing price, and we're going to see if the closing price breaks the previous bar's high or low, plus or minus 2 ATRs. So we're going to be using price in both indicator A and indicator B. Right? So I'm going to take the type and I'm going to change it to price. And so, alright, so the first thing is we're checking to see if the closing price is going to break the previous bar's high and low. So I'm going to leave indicator A both set to the closing price. And then indicator B, that is also going to be set to price, but this time, right, so we're taking the, let's see, so we're taking the closing price of the current bar, so I'm always going to have to keep shifting my arrows. We're taking the closing price of the current bar and comparing it to the previous bar, right, to one bar back. So, and to get a long signal, we want the closing price to break above the high price, right? So we're using the high price of the previous bar to generate a long signal. So for the price type long, we're going to use the high price. And if price, so if the current, actually this is how it's going to work, sorry guys. So BloodHound's running with calculate on bar close equal to true. So this is actually the comparison that we're actually doing is, right, so when NinjaTrader has calculate on bar close equals true, it doesn't use the current price, it doesn't use the current bar that's being built, right? It only works on the bar that just closed. So this is the actual comparison that we'll be doing. So we'll be seeing if the closing price breaks above the high or breaks below the low. So to generate a short signal, if the closing price like broke below the low, we're using the low of the previous bar to generate a short signal. So back to my solver here. There we go. So I'm using the low price to generate a short signal. And since we're looking at one bar back, our look back needs to be incremented up by 1 to 2 bars. And when we do that, we'll notice that a whole new set of options. And in this particular case, we're just using a single value, right? So the single value means just look at the price of 1 bar back. Just look at the price of that 1 bar. So, and so now, so we have our data set up, right? So we have the indicator A data set up. So we're comparing the closing price to the high and the low of the previous bar. So with a look back period of 2, that would be the previous bar. Okay. A look back period of 1 would be the current bar. Oops. There we go. Come on. 1. So you notice if I put 0 in there, it's going to go back to 1. So NinjaTrader's look back period starts at 1. So that's slightly different than a displacement. So since the look back period always starts at 1, we're going to set this to 2 to actually get the previous bar's high and low price. Right? So when I set this to 2, this gets the price for the previous bar's high and low. Right? So let me just shift this forward here. Alright, so just to reiterate, the look back period, the current bar here, so, right, so we'll just pretend for now that this is the current bar with the little green arrow. So the look back period of 1 identifies the current bar. Okay, so that's different than NinjaTrader's. Let me set this back to indicator. That's different than NinjaTrader's displacement. So the NinjaTrader displacement, it starts at 0. So 0 would be the current bar. And if I set a displacement to 1, then that would be the previous bar back. Right? So there's a difference here. So just so you guys know that, right? So a displacement starts at 0 for the current bar. The look back starts at 1 for the current bar. So, all right. So let me set this back to the price type. Okay. So we have our indicator A and indicator B set up to the prices that we're comparing against each other. So now the next step is to set up our amounts here. So we're going to use an ATR. And we want a multiple of 2 for the ATR. So if I set 2 in here, it's going to take the ATR and multiply it by 2. And we also want to change our ATR period. So since we're using an ATR with a 10 period, we also need to tell BloodHound to use an ATR of a 10 period. Right? And the value 2 is going to take the ATR value and multiply it by 2. So in this case, our ATR value, we can see here on the chart, is 0.053. So it's going to take 0.05 times 2. So that'll give us, essentially that'll give us 10 cents on the oil instrument, or 10 ticks there. All right. So since we're using the small amount, and it's a good idea that we go in here and set our large amount to the same thing. So let me just change that real quick. All right. So, and actually, excuse me, but we're actually using the large amount. Yeah, we're using the large amount actually. So just for clarification. And our outputs are already set. So we can see now that when A, so remember let me scroll up one more. So A is the indicator A value. So A actually represents the closing price of the current bar. So when A is greater than B, and in this case B is going to be the high price for a long signal, right? So we got a long output. So we would reference the price type for the long. So when A, the closing price, is greater than B, the high price of one bar back, because we're using a look back of 2, so it's going to be the previous high price, by 2 ATRs or more, then that's when we want a long signal, right? So the closing price has to be greater than the high of the previous bar by 2 ATRs or more, and that'll generate a long signal. And then for a short signal, a short output, it's going to be essentially the kind of the opposite, right? So A represents the closing price has to be less than B, and in this case B is going to be the low price. So when the closing price is less than the low of the previous bar by 2 ATRs or more, we're going to get a short output, since these are set to 1 here, since the outputs here are set to 1. So let's take a look. I believe that's all that's needed. Let's take a look and see if we actually get any results here. And so I'm thinking that, let's see, yeah, I'm thinking that I probably should get a long signal on this bar here. So let me do some quick calculations here and see. Alright, so we have an ATR of essentially 8 cents. So if we round this up, we'll just say 8 cents. So 2 ATRs, right, that's going to be 16 cents. So let's use our arrow here. So 18 cents. Oops. Alright, so 7 and 8 more, so that should be 15. Oh. It hit Ninja's arrow and scrolled it all the way to the beginning of the chart. Let me scroll back here. There we go. No, actually that didn't qualify. So, yeah, so price would have to break that value up there. That's right. The top of the white arrow is 2 ATRs away. So, oh, wait, hold on a sec here. So 16. No, hold on. Let me correct my math here. 13 cents. There we go. Okay. So that arrow should be 16. Yep. Okay. So that bar didn't qualify. It was just looks like it was 2 ticks shy of actually generating a signal there. All right. So let's see if we can find another spot here. Right. So this kind of illustrates also that, you know, when you're building a solver, you should always have a spot ready on your chart that you can, you know, check to make sure that your solver is built correctly to compare against. So I'm really going to have to find a really long bar here, it looks like. Well, actually, I'll tell you what. Let's just bend our rules a little bit. How about if we go 1.5 ATRs and see if that finds anything here. I'm sure that should, yeah, there we go. So there's a long bar. So yeah, I'd be pretty confident that let me grab an arrow. That from the high of this bar, somewhere up here, you know, is 1.5 ATRs. Okay, so there's a short signal. So from the low of the previous bar, right, the closing price of the bar definitely is more than 1.5 ATRs. And all right, here's the bar that we were first looking at. So let's see, once again, so ATR, essentially when we round it up, it's 0.08 or 8 cents. So 1.5 ATRs, that's going to be 12 cents. And yep. So there we go. So that means price has to break. The closing price has to close more than 12 cents above the previous bar high at 1.5 ATRs. So, which would be $49.09 where the arrow is. Okay, so essentially that would be it. So that's how you would set this up. Right, so indicator A, you're going to set, we're looking at the closing price of the current bar, which is a look back period of 1, and then we're comparing it to the high price for a long signal, the low price for a short signal, and we're using a look back period of 2, meaning the previous bar back, and then we're just looking at the single value. So we just want to look at the value of that actual bar. So just use single value there. And then you just have to set the ATR that you're looking for. All right, and we didn't have to change the outputs. Those were left as is. Okay, so all right, I think that does it. Let me take a look at the board and see if there were any kind of comments or further questions on this. All right, so it looks like I've got an extension of this question from Steve. He'd like to see, you know, maybe give it 2 bars to move 2 ATRs. Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm just reading through all the little comments here. So yeah, okay, so we'll expand upon this idea. All right, so I'll set this back to 2 ATRs there, and here, let me give this a name. All right, so 2 see. All right, so we got a 2 ATR breakout, you know, basically within 1 bar. And so I'm going to make a copy of this, and we'll make a modification to this and allow it to occur within 2 bars, possibly. All right, so let's. I'm going to shrink up my chart because I'm going to have to be able to see more data as I'm working with this. All right, so we have the first solver is, you know, set up to only look at the next bar. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off by making a copy of this bar here. And let's see. Let me rename this here. Okay, so I renamed both of my solvers here, just so I know that the first one here is for the first bar, and the second solver is for the second bar here. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to my logic tab, and now we'll go to existing nodes and we'll add this second one on here, and let's plug this in. And so I think essentially all we need to do is just change our look back period to 3, and we'll see what we get out of that. Actually, actually I don't think that's going to work, because the problem is our ATR is always adjusting. It's always adjusting itself. So we don't have a way. So let's go back to this example here with the arrows on it. So right, so this is the, let's see, right, so this is the bar. Oh, so actually, yeah, let me add a little clarification to what's happening here. Yeah, so this previous bar that we're looking at to get the high and low price, right, its ATR is essentially 0.08. However, when the calculation is being, when the ATR calculation is being done, since this bar here with the green arrow, this would be, all right, basically think of this as the current bar, right? So this is the current bar. The red square is the previous bar. So actually what's being used is the ATR of the current bar, right? There's no way to adjust, there's no way to use the previous bar's ATR value. So actually we're using an ATR of 0.09 or 9 cents. So we're actually, when we're checking this bar to see if the closing price, you know, broke above or below the high, it's actually 2 times the ATR of 9 cents, 0.09. So we're actually looking for a breakout of 18 cents, not the previous bar's, you know, 8 cents or 16 cents. So yeah, so our 2 ATR is going to be way up here at 18 cents. And so when we step forward, to look at another bar, once again our ATR could be changing. It could change again. So every time so we would be using the ATR of the current bar. So when we get to the second bar, to allow the second bar to happen, we'd be using a changing ATR value, of this second bar. So, while this would work, you just got to keep in mind that this ATR value is always the ATR of the current bar, right? So there's no way to lock in the ATR of the previous bar. Yeah, I'm just going to give that a little thought for a moment there to see if there is a way to do that. Yeah, no, I don't think there is. So, yeah, so when doing this, you just got to keep in mind that you're always using the ATR of the current bar. So, right, with this bar being the second bar that we're allowing, a breakout to occur, we're going to be using the new ATR value to do so. But essentially, to allow 2 bars, what we would do is just take these, trying to move that up, there we go. We would take these 2 solvers, connect them into an OR node, and do something like that. And that would essentially look for allow 2 bars. And, oh, there we go. So we did actually get a signal here. Yeah, so 2 ATRs does require quite a move, of price to generate a signal there, but looks like we did get some. So yeah, there's a couple more moves. All right, there's a long move. All right, I'm going to adjust the color green here, make it a little brighter. So the racing stripes show up on the chart a lot better. There we go. You guys should be able to see that green stripe real easy now. All right, a couple of signals there. Okay, so let me see if that wraps it up for this question. Okay, so Richard kind of has a similar question along the same lines here, but instead of using an ATR as his offset distance, he wants to just use the high and low of the previous 2 bars. Okay, so let me find that spot. I was working on the chart here. Use this as our example here. Okay, so the green arrow is going to be our current bar, and the 2 squares will represent the previous 2 bars. So, all right, so we're looking at the high of the previous 2 bars, the highest high, and we're going to be looking at the low of the previous 2 bars. All right, so we want to know if we get a breakout of that. To do something like, let's see, actually, that could be, yeah, that now can be done directly in the solvers to do this now. So, all right, let me shrink this up here. All right, so let me start a new logic template here. Alright, so we're looking for a 2-bar highest high and the lowest low of the 2-bar. Actually, here, how about if I rename this a little bit? Alright, so we're looking for the highest high or the lowest low of the previous 2 bars for a breakout here. And yeah, so we can do this now in the comparison solver. So yeah, previously we needed to use Chameleon to do this, and I guess just so we can visualize this on a chart, right? It's always good to have your indicators on a chart so you can visualize it, right? Since trading is a purely visual aspect. So let's get Chameleon on here. So Chameleon, right, I can set my look back to 2, and yeah, I believe that's all that's needed. Let's get that on there. Alright, great, yep. So let me move the arrow out of the way. So if we look at the green and red lines here, right, we can see that essentially they're capturing the highest high of the previous 2 bars. So, right, so with this bar, right, being the current bar, we can see that this green line is actually matching the high of the previous bar, because we're using a two bar period to capture the highest high and a 2-bar period to capture the lowest low. And so the low plot moved down to right here, since the low of this bar is lower than the previous bar. So actually, I guess I don't need my arrows anymore. So now when we get to the next bar, so this is our current bar, and so now what we're going to do is we're going to look back and find the highest high or the lowest low of the previous 2 bars, and we can visually see them now by the green line here. So right, it's going to be that green mark and that red mark. So that represents the highest high and lowest low of the previous 2 bars there. So that gives us a visual reference. So we could use Chameleon in the solver, or we could just use the solver's price type from now on. Alright, so just like the previous solvers, we're going to set our type to price, and we're interested in the closing price, so we're going to be comparing the closing price of the current bar to the previous 2 bars high and low. So I'm also going to be setting up indicator B to the price type as well. And so for a long breakout, once again, we're going to be using the high price. And for a short signal breakout, we're going to be using the low price. and we're going to be using a look back of 3 because we're using the previous 2 bars. We want to be looking at the previous 2 bars. So, and actually, yeah, now that I think about it, actually using the price type actually won't work, because when I use this look back period of 3, it also includes the current bar, and so we can see that the current bar moves the highest high, obviously up onto the new bar. So actually, in thinking this through, right, and working through this, right, I've kind of realized that using the type price actually isn't going to work. So we're going to go back to using chameleon. So let's go back and change this to indicator. So we're actually going to use an indicator here. So let's go and select chameleon. So I have chameleon set, and once again we're going to use a look back period of 2. And for a long signal, we're going to be using the high price to generate a long signal, right? And we're going to be using the low price to generate a short signal. So I'll change that there. All right, and for the indicator, we need to use a displacement of 1. Right? We're using a displacement of 1 because we don't want to use the plot. We don't want to use chameleon's plot. Let me grab an arrow here. So we don't want to use chameleon's plot on the current bar, because we can see that the high price moved way up here. But instead, we want to use chameleon's high plot 1 bar back. Right? So we want to use the green plot line 1 bar back. So that would be a displacement of 1. So that would be looking at the previous bar, essentially. And that's all we had to do. That's it. So we're just looking for a breakout by any amount. So we'll just leave this to 0 ticks. And as we look through this, yep. So you can see the closing price on this bar here, right there, broke above the previous 2 bars highs. Same there. And let's take a look at some of these shorts here. Right. So there's the closing price, and it closed below the previous 2 bars low price here. Same with this bar. The closing price closed below the previous 2 bars lows. Right. So there we have it. Okay, so let me think of some kind of name for this solver. It's always a good idea to name your solvers. Let's see. Well, alright, so what I'm comparing the close. So I'm comparing the closing price to the highest high or lowest low of 2 bars of the previous 2 bars there. So I guess that kind of naming convention's good enough, close enough there. All right, let me see if there's any comments on this before I move on to the next question. All right, I don't see any comments on this, so Richard, I hope that takes care of your question. All right, so KW, I guess I need an indicator. Yeah, I need to know of an indicator that you're using for this to give you an example. Well, actually, let's see. I think yeah, let me use maybe the pivots indicator. All right, so let me put the pivots indicator on the chart here and see if that works for us. We'll see if that makes a good example. All right, so when using the pivots indicator, NinjaTrader has said that when you're using the pivots indicator inside of a strategy or inside of another indicator, so we're going to be using the pivots indicator inside of BloodHound, which is another indicator. You have to use calculate from intraday data. All right, so NinjaTrader has said that using the daily bars doesn't always work correctly. So just keep that in mind when you're using Ninja's pivots indicator. And it's probably the case with any other similar type of indicator. So if there's a custom indicator out there that has the ability to use daily bars or intraday data, I'm sure that that indicator is only going to work correctly when it's calculated from intraday data as well. So because this is kind of a universal issue that NinjaTrader has acknowledged. All right, so let's see, width. Let's change the width to 100. Alright, so first thing I have to do is I have to find an example on my charts here. So let me scroll through here and try and find an example. Change my chart to a 5-minute. Hopefully that'll help. Okay, I think I found two areas here that I can use. Alright, so let me read the question again, and alright, so the question is, if price falls between an indicator's support resistance level, so we're going to use the pivot indicator here, so we'll just use the PP line and the S1 line, right, the pivot point line and the S1 line as our support resistance lines for the indicator. So if price falls between them, so I can see I've found an area here that where price falls in between our two pivot lines, and then so if price breaks out. So we want to know if if price breaks out to the high side, then we want a long signal. If price breaks out to the low side, we want a short signal. And then also KW has added a requirement here where we want to make sure that there's a 30 tick separation from the from our two support resistance lines here. Right, so we want a 30 tick separation to, I guess, essentially validate that this is a valid, support resistance area here. So anything less than 30 ticks, we wouldn't want to consider the breakout. All right. So let me get things set up here. All right, so we're looking for support resistance breakout with a 30 tick separation. And let's see. Yeah, so I think the best solver for the job would be, once again, to use a comparison solver. So let's grab that comparison solver. This comparison solver, I guess I consider it kind of the workhorse of all the solvers. This guy definitely seems to get used the most. All right, so we're essentially, what we're doing here, let's focus on this area right here. And okay, just a moment. Let me fade these the chameleon lines back to the background here. Let me kind of fade them back. Okay. All right, so we're comparing the closing price, right? We want to know when the closing price, breaks out, breaks below our S1 line here, or if it breaks above the pivot point line, right, as our resistance line here. So let's just work on this area right here. All right, so the first thing we're using is we're comparing the closing price. So once again, let's change our type to price, and we want to use the closing price. So we can just leave that alone. All right, so indicator B is actually going to be an indicator. We're going to use a pivot indicator in this example. So in my pivots indicator, right, I also need to change let's see, the prior day high-low close. I need to set this to calculate from intraday data. So that way, right, because you will actually get different values if you use daily bars versus intraday data. But just remember that the daily bars doesn't work correctly for the pivots indicator. So let's set this to intraday data. And so now what we need to do is, pick the correct plots that we want to use, right? So when price breaks above the PP line, right, that's our upper resistance line for this example. So we want a long signal when price breaks above it. If price breaks below the S1, the S1, we want a short signal. All right, so we're using the S1 in this example. So there we go. So I have the two check boxes that I want. And so we can see that the comparison solver essentially identifies whenever price is below right below our S1 line, and it identifies whenever price breaks above or is above the PP line. So, this may or may not be desired. You may want just a single signal out of this. So let me shrink this back up again. So if we'd like just a single red racing stripe when price crosses below, then what we could do is we could use a crossover, right? So crossovers only happen on one bar, right? There's only one bar where you actually get a crossover event. So the crossover will just give us a single racing bar stripe. So we'll set the crossover up the same way, and it gives us two different options here. So for the crossover, right, we have an indicator A and we have an indicator B as well. So we're going to set these up the same way. So let me change the type to price, and we're using the closing price here. And then for indicator B, we need to change our indicator to the pivots. Right, so let's go through and set the pivots indicator up like so. Right, so once again, we're going to use the PP line to generate a long cross up, and we're going to use the S1 pivot line to generate a short cross down, like so. And there we go. Now let's take a look at this. Right, so that may be more desirable. So let's just, I guess we'll just stick with the crossover solver because that looks a little nicer and cleaner, right? So there we go. We can see all these little crossover points, right? Okay, now the last condition is, remember, we needed to make sure that there was a 30 tick separation between the two pivot lines. So, yeah, let's see, to do that would require the comparison solver. So what we're going to have to do is compare, the PP line to the S1 line and make sure that there's a 30 tick separation here. Right. So we know that our separation is going to be 30 ticks, so we can go ahead and set our large amount difference and our small amount difference to 30 ticks. And next, we need to set indicator A. We'll set that to the PP plot, right? And we'll set indicator B to the S1 plot, right? So let's go set those indicators up. So I'm just going to set them up the same way as I did before. And so this is only going to be the PP plot. So we're going to generate a long and short signal, right? So keep in mind that when we're looking for a 30 tick separation, that doesn't define a long signal or a short signal, right? That separation is good for both a long signal and a short signal. So, right, so since we're looking for a separation, that's why the PP line is going to be used for long and short signals. And down here in indicator B, once again, we'll set this to the pivot indicator. Set this to intraday data, and now we're going to set indicator B to the S1 plot. And once again, we want to generate both a long and a short using this. And the reason why is, because once again, this is a non-trade directional requirement. So a trade can be taken either long or short as long as there's a 30 tick separation. So now, that's the reason why, why we used S1 and selected both of these plots here. Okay, so now we just need to adjust our output settings here. So if I just do something like that, right? So let's look through this. So for the long output, if A, and remember, indicator A represents the PP line, right? So if I open this up, we have the PP plot selected here for indicator A. So if A, the PP line, is greater than B, which is the pivot's S1 line, then we want a long output. But also, if A is less than, if the PP line is less than the S1 line, we want a long signal, right? So as long as, as long as the PP line is greater than 30 ticks from S1 or less than 30 ticks, right? As long as it's 30 ticks away, separated, then we're good to go. And we also want a short output when the same requirements are met. And if we look at the chart, what we should get is both a long and a short output, right? So this condition is just allowing a long or short trade because we have a 30 tick separation, right? So this doesn't define the direction of the trade, it just allows both a long and a short trade to happen because we don't know where the breakout direction is going to be yet. And the breakout, right, so the breakout direction is what actually defines whether it's a long or a short signal. So let me scroll back a few days. Oh, and we'll actually see if, yeah, okay, great. So you'll notice here, right, so the orange line basically, is the day when the day ends. So we can see on, let's see, this is the 24th. So on February 24th, our pivot lines, or our support resistance lines, were more than 30 ticks away. If we switch over here to the 23rd, and we now look at our pivot lines, we can see that they were very close together, and look, there's no output. So that solver gave us no output, so that would not allow any signals to occur. And right, so now the final step to get this all to work correctly is we need to use an AND node. So, right, so if we only look at the crossover event, right, so let me first give these solvers a name here. So we're looking for the close to crossover crossover some kind of support resistance line. So I'm going to name both of these solvers here. Alright, so yeah. Alright, now I got my solvers named. Okay, so we're just gonna, let's just look at the crossover event when price crosses over our breakout. Let's take a look here. Okay, so good, we can see we get a bunch of crossovers here, and let's see, I'm going to set that arrow to a 30 tick arrow. Let's see, alright, so this arrow represents a distance of 30 ticks. So you can see that, you know, right, the PP line and the S1 line are definitely separated by more than 30 ticks on this day. So this is the 24th. So let's scroll back to this day here, and let me adjust that arrow length here. Actually, you know what? On this day, oh, there we go. Great. So we did actually get some crossover signals on this day. Good deal. Let me grab my arrow here. Alright, so the arrow, we can, let's see, let me slide this forward a little bit. So this arrow is 30 ticks long, and you can see the arrow is just barely, let me scroll this, stretch this out a little bit here. Yeah, so we can see that the distance between the PP and S1 is just less than 30 ticks. Right, so we do have these trade signals here, but with the PP1 and the S1 just less than 30 ticks, as soon as I add in this solver here, right, so this solver is making sure that we have a 30 tick separation, and if I take a look at its output, right, there is no long and short output on this day because there's not enough separation. So when I connect this into the AND node, it also blocks those trade signals, right? So now those trade signals for this day will not happen, will not occur. Let's shrink the chart up here. Now, if we scroll forward to the next day, there we go. Alright, so on the next day, we can see there's all kinds of trade signals because our two support resistance lines are definitely spaced more than 30 ticks apart. So this arrow here, I'm pretty sure, is still 30 ticks. Yep. Alright, so KW, that is how you would do that. So let's just review this again real quick. So we have a crossover solver, a crossover solver, right, that's looking for the closing price to cross over our support resistance indicator, right? So in this case, we're using the pivots indicator, right? We're using the PP and the S1 line of the pivots. And then we have another solver here, the comparison solver, which is looking for a 30 tick separation. And we had to change our long and short output by adding a 1 into both of these fields. So, right, so we have an output when A is greater than B, and we have an output when A is less than B, and same for the short side here. Alright, I hope that does it. You know, if you just wanted to, you know, this other comparison solver here, so as we, let's see, let me set that chart up there. So if I use this solver instead of the crossover, plug that in there, right, then that basically just identifies the entire time that price is above our upper resistance line. Just tells us that price is above it whenever it is. And if we use the crossover solver, it just kind of gives us a nicer, cleaner, you know, single one signal, one racing stripe at the crossover bar. Okay, good deal. All right, well, guys, you know, I've heard that other people are still getting flickering screens, so I'm sure this is kind of difficult to look at. Hopefully it doesn't show up in the recording. So I will end this workshop early today and see if I can get this fixed for next Friday. All right, well, thank you guys for being here, and have a good weekend. And just remember, if you have questions, please feel free, you know, to email your questions in prior to these Friday workshops, you know, on Thursday or sooner, and I'll cover them in the workshop. All right. So thank you guys. I hope to see you next Friday. Okay. Bye bye.